Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends, I hope everyone is doing well. I'm doing a video today to show you some teams that can be used for war offense. I'll bring my usual tips, rationale, and gameplay footage to structure your war efforts around. I know that for some people Guild War isn't necessarily their cup of tea, but the game mode isn't going anywhere, so I thought I would put out some insight for those who enjoy the strategy. For every team that I show you today, I'm going to tell you which characters are core for the team and which ones are flexible, along with the key abilities and decision points when you use them. The teams should work even into the 60% Medicaid buff, and I'll show you gameplay demonstrating a lot of punch-ups. A shout out to my collaborators in this one, KStud and Aarons. Thanks guys.
Hello friends. Sorry to interrupt the scheduled broadcast again, but I just snuck in to announce the 10k sub celebration code. Thanks again for all your support. Nandi 5 digits gets you some goodies, and the rewards are what you voted for. 10 Calgar and Exeter Row shards to go along with 10,000 gold and 1 requisition. The grand prize winner has also been drawn, and Nandi will contact you about how to claim your prize. Stay tuned for more giveaways and codes in the future. Back to Nandi now!
The first team we'll talk about is the Tau team. The core here are the 3 Tau that have been highlighted in the black frame. This team does well for 2 reasons. Number 1, the enemy AI is dumb, and they don't recognize when your characters have Overwatch on, so they simply run into Revas and a few of them will die right off the bat. Shadowsun and Ethana are there to increase Revas' Overwatch damage a little bit, because Revas needs a little bit of help when enemies have the Medicaid buff up. That brings us on to the second angle of attack for the team. Once you've killed a few enemies, then you have a wealth of summons to distract the enemy AI. Revas, Sho, and Shadowsun all summon drones, and Gibascraps can add a Grot tank to the battle as well. The remaining enemies run around fighting the summons, while your main characters pick them off. The gameplay footage here demonstrates exactly that. I forgot to press record at the start of the fight, but you can see how I set up a defensive position in the bottom of the map. I forgot to take the high ground and mispositioned my setup, so I wasn't able to kill the enemy Bellator with Revas straight away. Still, I have so many summons between Sho, Revas, Shadowsun and Gibascraps that I can kill the enemy forces without too much difficulty, and even without the most optimum positioning here. This team works by using the 3 core Tyranids and Isabella, along with a ranged damage dealer of your choice. The concept is simple. Use Isabella and Tyrant Guard to tank the front line, while the Neurothrope and Winged Prime keep adding Hormagaunts to the battlefield and overwhelming the enemy. The Neurothrope does quite a lot of damage, and the Hormagaunts are more fodder to distract the enemy with. I really like this team against slow moving teams, like the Death Guard Deathball. These teams don't have the mobility to reach your back line, and therefore they're slow and stuck hitting the front line Tyrant Guard to little effect. In this footage we see exactly this pattern of play out. The enemy is slow to approach over the north bridge, and we are able to set up our defensive shell appropriately. We can even use Isabella to spend the first turn healing our characters that were damaged by the artillery from the start of the fight. The Neurothrope stands at the back and picks off the enemies. Eventually, our team comes out victorious without a single loss. The core of this team really is the by now famous Abraxas and Yazagor. For those unfamiliar with the combination, Abraxas summons a bunch of demons and then Yazagor teleports him to another part of the map. You then need any form of psychic damage to trigger the summoning chain again. These daemons do a lot of damage due to how Abraxas' passive works, and you can potentially end up with 12 daemon summons in a single turn. It's often more than enough to win a fight, even when you're punching up. In this fight we show the power of that combination. We summon loads of daemons onto the battlefield and overwhelm our enemy's powerful legendary characters. I'm not going to bore you with the whole fight, but rest assured that we win here after this explosive summoning turn. I call this team the Battle Fatigue team but I could just as easily call it something to do with summoning spam. Yarrick, Creed and Snotflogger crowd the battlefield with their summons, whose job it is to distract the enemy for as long as possible. While the enemy's attention is elsewhere, our high damage characters pick them off. Snotflogger's active can also be used to buy you a crucial turn by taunting the enemies as well. It's worth remembering that Yarrick's passive, although not highlighted as a core ability on the slide, increases the damage of Snotflogger's grot summons as well. In this clip, we put Creed just slightly forward into the danger zone so that he summons Sergeant Kell early on. We get a lot of guardsmen onto the battlefield straight away, and then our high damage characters like Sarquel and Sybil do the heavy lifting and finish off the enemy team. We win the fight in the end by only losing Castellan Creed. I'm not even going to bother showing you footage of this team because it's good and so well known. The premise is simple. Use Onshi on Ragnar so that you get 2 instances of Warhowl on the same turn. These abilities stack, and then you get a melee character with an area of effectability like Calgar or Janezar to slaughter the enemy forces. You could theoretically add Karn in here too, but the team doesn't need that much muscle. The trio of Ragnar, Onshi and Calgar is enough to win the fight regardless of who the other 2 characters are in the flex slots. Speaking of Karn, I like the idea of slotting him here in the Deathball team alongside Maladus and Rotbone. It's a melee focused team that is lethal once they get into melee range, and the beautiful thing about fighting against the AI is that they run towards you as fast as they can, negating the traditional disadvantage of playing a slow moving team. Karn fits well into the team because he already does loads of damage, and then the Death Guard provide a lovely negative armor debuff to make him and his attacks even more powerful. I like complementing the team with a ranged damage dealer like Volk, because the team simply is too melee focused. I don't have footage for this team yet because Karn is yet to be released at time of recording. The core of the mechanical team is also the core of the mechanical raid team that has been seeing so much success of late. Exeter Row does a lot of damage and the rest of the mechs are there to trigger Row and or add summons to the battlefield. After Exeter Row has dealt with a few targets, then the remainder often don't have enough left in the tank to beat the constant waves of summons as well as your main character force. I like Anofet as the 5th character for the team because when Alefnul's scarabs die, then you can summon a powerful horde of Necron warriors. The mech team in this footage does exactly that. We let the enemy close some ground on turn 1 before summoning with Alefnul and doing some chain attacks to get Exeter Row in range of their main force. A combination of our mechanical summons as well as high damage from Exeter Row sees us clean up the enemy forces with relative ease, and even though I'm not playing the whole fight out, you can see how easy it is to win from here. The multi-hit team. I really enjoy this team for its nostalgia element. These guys were the main gang for guild raids before we met characters like Ragnar and Exeter Row. The team splits into 2 halves, the ranged damage dealers, with Ra and Thaddeus, and the tankier frontline of Bellator and Brother Burchard. Really, it's just about placing Eldryon 2 hexes away from key targets and letting the rest of the team do the dirty work. In this footage we see another example of why you shouldn't be placing deep strike characters on defense. Here, deep striking Angrax runs all the way to the front line and eats a big hit from a high ground, Eldryon and Thaddeus boosted Morgan Ra. Our tanky and resilient front line does its job properly to distract enemy attention while our ranged damage dealers stay at the back and mop them up. The rest of the fight is pretty easy as we have great positioning from Eldryon and Ra and are able to wipe out the enemy here without a single loss. The Black Templar team isn't as much of a core team as it is a nod to how powerful Brother Jaeger and Godswill are. They are insanely strong melee characters with active abilities that can completely neuter key enemy characters. In this team I've paired them with Incisus and Thoriad for survivability, and Celestine fills in the last flex slot. Jaeger's passive also helps deal with melee characters and summons more easily. This clip is a fairly straightforward slugfest between 2 teams, and the core 2 Black Templar here do a lot of the heavy lifting to carry our team to victory. I suspect that in the long term this team will end up dissolving into something else, or having the characters spread out, but the value of Godswill and Thoriad will always be there, even as standalone characters. I've called this team KStud's Monstrosity. I honestly couldn't get this team to work myself, but KStud really likes it and has had a lot of success with it. Really, there are two halves to the team. Firstly, you have Typhus and Toth, who are able to do a lot of area of effect damage to the enemy through combining both of their actives. While this is happening, you're sort of charging up Corodius and Ascor in the backline, so that eventually you can unleash a host of Plague Bearers to mop up the battlefield. In this clip you can see how that action plays out, with Toth and Typhus dealing heavy initial damage. Then, Ascor and Corodius ensure the battle's success with an army of Poxwalkers. The final bits of this battle take a bit of time to play out, because Incisus and Tyrant Guard are boxed in and protecting each other, but it's clearly a win for KStud and his team. That's all I've got for today. I've tried to keep the video short and sweet, but inevitably time gets added on when you have lots of gameplay footage. Hopefully the content today helped you with your team building and has given you some inspiration for the next war season. I like to support and give back to those that have helped me, and today I've included KStud's referral code in my video. He's a great guy who has helped me a lot, and I would love if you could consider entering his referral code on screen. It supports him, who in turn supports me in the work that I do. It is single use though, so choose who you support carefully. Bye for now.
Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!